Welcome into NFL on 365 Sports. I'm your host, Grayson, and today we are continuing our NFL draft recaps, and today we're talking the Indianapolis Colts. Let's get it going. Okay, so today we're talking the Colts. I'm really excited to kind of dig into this one because obviously, the draft capital wasn't great initially. The Carson Wentz trade really kind of made sure of that, and no first-round pick here for the Colts. So it's kind of more of a depth draft, but they did a great job at just kind of assembling picks here, trading back and adding picks, and then also trading up to try to get another pick in the third round. So 1 second, 3/3. Let's talk about some of these picks for the Colts. Their first pick came round 2, pick 53. This came after trading back out of pick 42, I believe it was. And so they end up taking Cincinnati wide receiver Alec Pierce. I think everyone knew they were going to take a wide receiver. They had to. Michael Pittman is the only established guy on the roster right now. T.Y. Hilton is not signed back yet. So you knew they were going to address this position. And it came at a really interesting point in the draft because you had George Pickens taken right before him, and then you had Sky Moore taking right after him. So I found that to be interesting. I feel like the Colts kind of had their pick of their guy, and I think Alec Pierce was just the guy they simply wanted in this draft. They went and saw a workout with him and Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati. They ended up liking Alec Pierce. He ended up being the guy they were actually targeting and not Ridder. And yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting prospect. He's about 6'3", 211 pounds is what he measured at the combine, ran a 4.41, a 40.5-inch vertical, a 4.28 shuttle. I mean, all of that tells you elite athlete. I mean, that is an elite athletic profile. And I think when you look at his game, you immediately on tape see a guy who is an absolute red zone monster, a guy deep downfield who is going to threat every defense deep. And with his size, I mean, you just kind of throw it up and you're going to be able to make some plays deep downfield. You're going to be able to stress out safeties and stress coverage in a big way. And I think the other thing that is massive about him is he's a great blocker. And the Colts really needed that because you look at the Colts and you go, okay, they lost Zach Pascal. Who's going to come in and be a reliable blocker for them opposite Michael Pittman? Because we know how good Michael Pittman is as a blocker. So you talk about Alec Pierce. He's a guy who's going to be able to get downfield and block guys, block cornerbacks, and just be explosive in that way. He broke out as a sophomore with 652 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then this past year, 884 yards and 8 touchdowns. Just a really well-rounded wide receiver who has upside because of his athletic potential. Moving on to round 3, pick 73. Once again, they addressed a position of need, which was tight end. Jelani Woods, the tight end out of Virginia, he finished last year with 598 yards and 8 touchdowns after really not playing that position. Not really not playing that position, but not getting opportunities at that position while at Oklahoma State. So he moves to Virginia, goes to a more pass-happy offense, and really excels, really dominates. He's 6'7", 259 pounds, and ran a 4.61. So great size, great speed. I think he's going to end up being a very impactful player for the Colts sooner rather than later. So this kind of led me into kind of wanting to talk about a little bit of a broader thing with the Colts here is the tight end position. Because they also drafted Andrew Ogletree later in the draft. They signed Mo Alley Cox this offseason. They drafted Kylan Granson last year. What's this room going to look like? That's what I'm really curious about. Everyone knew they had to address tight end, but it's interesting that they took 2 guys. And I think that just shows how much they liked both of these tight ends and how much they could fit this scheme. But it will be something to watch going forward, how the Colts use these tight ends, especially after losing Jack Doyle to retirement this offseason. Just 4 picks later, round 3, pick 77, they took the guy that I thought they were going to take in round 2, which is Bernhard Raimann, which this is great value. This is absolutely phenomenal value. In my opinion, he was the only guy on the board who is a guy who you felt like could play right away at left tackle. And that's just the way I feel about it. At, right around 6'5", 305 pounds, a little bit taller than that, more like 6'6", I'd say. He's a very good player who some mock drafts had as a first-round draft pick. I always felt like he was probably going to be in that, 40 to 60 range, but he ends up falling all the way to 77. Perfect value for the Colts. Everything lined up for them by him falling all the way back to them. He is 25 years old, so he's older in age, but not older in experience, because this was his first year really truly playing the left tackle position consistently. So still young at the position, but an older guy who is very strong, has a good background as far as being able to move well. His mobility is very, very solid as a former tight end, but I also think he's strong enough to make an impact in the run game as well. And the Colts haven't been able to figure out this position since they lost Anthony Costanzo few years ago. And so now you bring in a left tackle who you feel like you can mold into a very good player. And now I think for this year, he's a true backup at left tackle with the upside to be a starter year one. That's the way I feel about him. And to get him in the third round, massive for the Colts to fill another position of need. So you move on a little bit later in the draft, and here you go. Here's Chris Ballard saying, we're moving up. We're going to make a trade. We're going to get back into the third round because there's a guy we really, really like on the board. And that's exactly what he did. Moved up to round 3, pick 96, gave up a future third-round pick next year to go and get Maryland safety Nick Cross. And this was a really interesting one, and I needed to dig a little bit deeper before I could really form an opinion on him. But the simple fact of the matter is, he ran a 4.34 40 time. He's only 20 years old, and he's got 5 interceptions in just 27 career games. All of that just screams upside to me in this defense. I think he's going to end up being a fantastic player. And when you look at the Colts secondary, they had so many problems just staying healthy last year, and they really need to add depth there. When you look at Khari Willis and Julian Blackmon, Blackmon got hurt last year, tore his Achilles, so he didn't play. And so, it's hard to speak to, is he going to be back to the way he was? Is he a guy who's going to consistently have a bunch of injuries? Was this just a one-off type thing? You don't really know what his recovery is going to be like. And then Khari Willis has been dealing with injuries throughout his career, really, and just hasn't been able to consistently be on the field. They went out, added Rodney McLeod in free agency, and now you're able to go and get Nick Cross to add to that group. I think this was a fantastic move, and I think it just speaks to kind of what Chris Ballard and this team wants at safety. And I also think it speaks to how much they value Nick Cross as a guy who I think they believe could come in and play maybe right away, but I think he's definitely a guy who they see as a future starting safety. And when you can go get a guy like that later in the third round, that's a great draft pick. As far as my overall thoughts, I thought it was a good draft. They filled every single need. I love the trade back to try to get more draft picks inside the first 3 rounds. We're able to come away with 4 really solid draft picks in those first 3 rounds. I just absolutely love what they did. Only issue is they don't have high upside, guy that they could have gotten in the first round, if that makes sense. They don't have a guy that just kind of, whoa, how did they get this guy? This guy's going to come in and be, a superstar day one. I don't know if they have a guy like that, but I think filling every single need with solid contributors and guys who maybe have upside in the future is an absolutely big deal. So the Colts get a B+ on my grading system. They had a very, very good draft and a deep draft as well as they get prepared for next season. So that's it for the Colts. I will continue these draft recaps throughout the coming weeks, I'm going to try to talk about pretty much every single team, give my thoughts in their draft and kind of what's going ahead in their future, kind of what they're preparing for after this draft. But for NFL and 365 Sports, I'm Grayson Grunhafer. Catch you next week.